Okay, so I made a tweet talking about SmooshGate. So I kind of want to explain kind of my thoughts more in depth on it. I made a few tweets that were like essentially saying, don't break the web, and uh, kind of think about the sites that will actually be broken. But I think that there's actually a much bigger issue at hand when it comes to standards and honestly the way that we are approaching this as a development community. So one of the things that's been really worrying me is a lot of people are coming out and saying, you know, you're ruining the future of the web, like by not using flatten in this case, or by not making a decision that would break past sites. You're impacting or hurting the future of the web now. Well, first of all, for a lot of these things, we can choose a different name or choose a different standard that doesn't break past sites. That's pretty easy. The semantics around it and the naming about it might not be perfect. It might not be ideal, but you kind of can have it both ways. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the sentiment of breaking the web is okay, or just looking at what happens with the top sites in the world is really what this is about. And that worries me. Uh, I've gone to, I've talked to people from international markets or from places even in the US with low internet. And I think in a lot of the environment that we get around, I've taught at a boot camp. I'm actually wearing an Iron Yard t-shirt. We had gigabit Ethernet to teach people on. They had full access to Stack Overflow, to MDN, to myself as an instructor, as someone who had worked in the industry for 5-6 years, who had known and caught up with best standards. And for those people, yeah, that's great. They can, learn the best standards, learn the new fashion way of doing things. But for people in emerging markets or without internet, or people that are learning in a more traditional environment where the curriculum is a book, for a lot of these people, for a lot of people out there, we don't empathize. There are great resources like Egghead and Udemy and things where new stuff rises to the top, but there's also tons and tons of old video resources and book resources that go offline, and people may not have access for weeks when referring to documentation and then go to run their website. Or people who live in low connectivity areas. I've talked to people that still work offline a lot of the time and then go to an internet cafe or go into the city or go to visit a family member who has internet, and to go there and then learn that your website broke because the thing that you learned in your book is no longer valid, and there's not great documentation on how to fix that because a new standard came in and broke something that was valid JavaScript or was valid C# or C++ or whatever, and then it comes in and you come to run your code, you're completely demoralized. And I think we're not empathizing with that. Another thing that we're not empathizing is, for so many of us, we're working on evergreen websites, right? We're working on websites and applications where we're constantly touching the code. We're constantly working on new features. We're constantly updating to the newest libraries. We're working with the newest Webpack gulp monstrosity that comes out tomorrow. But I can say from experience, I've been doing this web thing for over 10 years now, and I can say for experience, probably 50% of my websites, I don't even have an SSH key that logs into the VPS for some of these websites. There's websites that I made years ago that I don't have access to build those. Those still have my name on it. They still are running. I still pay, for hosting and for the actual domain names for tons of websites that I have no way of updating, and I have no time to update. A new standard comes in and blows that away. That's gone. That's a piece of the internet that is gone, and it was completely avoidable. Now, I'm not saying that we go and scavenge every little single person's code and we try to find the ways that they've used names that are potentially reserved. We have reserved words in JavaScript for this reason, and I think that we should maybe go back to using some reserved words of saying, hey, this feature isn't baked yet, but this name, we can see people starting to use it in libraries or wanting to start to use it, or we can look ahead and see that this might be a trend that comes in the future. So let's go ahead and reserve that property name or that word or this part of a prototype for JavaScript itself. But I just think that for this, for me, it's not about flatten. It's not about this behavior. It's not about moo tools. It's about empathizing with sites that exist, empathizing with developers that don't have access to the greatest resources, don't have access to all the stuff that you or I might have. You're probably watching this on YouTube, or if it's short enough, on Twitter, where you're on a huge connection that can do 720p video or 1080p or even 4K video. And you have access to go to MDN every day and, go to Egghead and go to these other resources that have up-to-date information. You can, scour GitHub issues. But for a lot of developers, they don't know these resources. They don't have these resources. And we can't just break the web for them and just say, get with the times. We can't break the web for sites made even 5 years ago. I think it's crazy that people are like, oh, this is 5 years ago, we can just let it die, basically, even though it's like that's an insane proposition, right? I think for a lot of us, we're working on apps that are 6 to 18 months old. Going from the communities that I've talked to, a lot of people have either refactors, rebuilds, or completely new apps that are in that 6 to 18 month time period. They're not working on code bases that are 24, even like 3 or 4 years old. A lot of people just rewrite their app. But I can say probably in those companies, there's legacy parts of their app that aren't touched. And now one last point that I want to do is there was a lot of discussion about polling developers and talking about TC39 not representing developers. Well, great. TC39 isn't about representing developers. It's about representing all of the users of the web. That does include developers, but it also includes your grandparents, your parents, your kids, your grandkids that don't have the technical aptitude, right? If they come across a site and they have to click on legacy button, you had to do this in IE. It was awful. I would have to tech support family members that didn't know how to do this. That was like, run in legacy mode for IE 8 or IE 4, right? You were in IE 8 and it was like, run in legacy mode for IE 6 or IE 4. That's not a method to do it. But the other thing I think is we've been polling developers and we've been getting their opinions. And we have to remember that there's a lot of people that are going to be outspoken that either don't know what's going on, they don't receive the poll at all because they're not in our network, or even if they did receive the poll, they would look at it and be like, what does this even mean? We have to account for the people that don't know how to have a voice in this. And finally, okay, the big thing was like the big stat of, well, does moo tools even matter? It accounts for 1 to 7% of the top million websites indexed by Google and advertising companies. That's cool. I've been working for 10 years and I can say about 80% of the applications that I have aren't indexed. That means that, okay, those are the top million websites, but of those, what internal tools, what things that are behind paywalls or login walls are never indexed, never known about? These statistics don't come out because you can't get to those contents. You can't get to those parts of the app without indexing. There's no statistics. There's no public statistics of what is being used in those parts of the application. So I would say just be wary. Be wary of making really broad and overreaching statements. Be wary of who your audience is. Be wary of who you're polling. Be wary of who you're representing, and be wary of people that may not have the same opportunities, may not have the same information, and may not have the same guidance that you do. So thanks. Sorry for the rant. It went 10 minutes over, so it's not going to be on it's not going to be on Twitter. It's going to be on YouTube. So thank you.